Hey, this is Adam with Dusterhoff Racing. Today we're going to show you how to install a supercharger pulley on a TRX. This job usually takes around 3 hours depending on experience. The supercharger in the TRX is set way back under the cowl, so there's 6 bolts that prevent you from removing the lid. We like to replace the lid gasket, so we pull the supercharger off the truck. But if you're not replacing the lid gasket, you can just tilt the front of the supercharger up to get the snout off.
So the first step is to disconnect and isolate the negative battery cable. Next, you're going to remove the plastic clips that hold on this cover panel. This is an aftermarket intake, so it's a little different than stock. Next, you're going to remove all the mounting bolts that hold in the cold air intake. This cold air intake mounts exactly like a factory one would. Next, you remove the bracket that holds the AC lines to the front of the engine. This just kind of gives you a little more room to work with. Then you can remove the supercharger belt. Next, you're going to unplug the harness and all the lines. I like to pull the tabs and get the whole harness out of the way. That way when you pull the supercharger forward, you're not tugging on anything. Before you get ready to pull the supercharger forward, make sure to undo these 3 connectors on the back. There's a map sensor on the driver's side, there's a coolant temperature sensor, and a fuel pressure sensor on the passenger side. Next, you remove the 10 bolts that bolt the supercharger to the cylinder heads. The front 4 bolts slide out, but the rear 6 will come in contact with the cowl. I like to put a zip tie on those bolts to hold them up so they don't come in contact with the cylinder head anymore. You could also use a rubber band. Use a pry bar to pop the supercharger up off of the dowels. And then you can put a block of wood underneath it. This way you can get the lid and the snout off if you're not removing it from the truck. We removed the supercharger completely. Like I said earlier, they're just a lot easier to work on this way. The TRXs can be a little bit of a pain up under the cowl. First, remove all the bolts that hold the supercharger lid on. Pick up the lid starting at the back, and you can kind of wiggle it out of the bypass cuff. Next, you remove the bypass cuff. Next, remove the map sensor. You need a low profile Torx because it's kind of up against the side of the supercharger. Try and remove as much of the dirt as you can so it doesn't fall into the supercharger when you pull the snout off. Then remove the 6 bolts that hold the snout to the supercharger. The top right bolt's a little easier if you use a swivel. Rock the snout back and forth as you're pulling it off. Make sure you keep track of all of the bushings and put them back into the coupler. Install your pin holding tool. I like to put it in a vise, but you can leave it on the table if you don't have a vise handy. Remove the cap off of the front of the pulley. Next, give it a couple quick zaps from a large impact. Now we can install the new hub with some blue Loctite and torque it to 95 Newton meters. Now you can install your pulley with the 6 bolts. Use blue Loctite on this as well and torque it to 85 inch-pounds. Make sure all your bushings are in place. We're upgrading in this case. Now you're ready to reinstall your snout with a fresh gasket. Then you put the snout back on. These are tighter bushings, so you kind of have to work it in. The factory ones usually slide in a little easier. Reinstall your 6 mounting bolts and snug them down. Next, torque them to 36 Newton meters, working from the inside out. Reinstall the bypass cuff. Reinstall the map sensor. Reinstall your lid with a fresh gasket. and make sure that the O-rings in the supercharger and the green gaskets in the lid are all still in place. Set the supercharger lid on with the bypass cuff first. I like to use a couple of mounting bolts to help line up the gasket so I can reinstall the lid bolts. Now you're ready to reinstall all the bolts that hold the lid down. Now you can snug all the bolts down and then torque to spec using the sequence shown. Now you can put the supercharger back into place. Remember, the rear 6 bolts need to be installed with the zip ties or rubber bands to keep them from falling down through. Once it's back up under the cowl, you can cut the zip ties or take the rubber bands off to drop those bolts down. Now you can torque the bolts to spec. Here's the sequence that the manufacturer recommends. With everything torqued down properly, you can begin to reconnect the harness.
So that's it for the pulley install. Thanks for watching. We keep a variety of pulleys in stock, so feel free to reach out to us and we'll help find the one that's right for you. If you found this video helpful, we do have more installation videos, so feel free to check those out as well.